So, welcome to this special edition of NDTV. As part of NDTV's expanding world news coverage, we will be looking at several topics. One among them is, of course, immigration. It impacts millions of people across the globe. So, to head straight right into the debate, we have three guests joining us. We have Dita Deboni joining us from Auckland. She is a senior journalist with National Business Review. We have Vandana Rai. She's a licensed immigration advisor. She's also based in Auckland. And we have our own NDTV's Muhammad Ghazali, who is joining us from Chandigarh. He has covered a lot of stories on immigration, so he is sort of an expert on the matter. So, to begin with, I'll go straight to Dita. Dita, what could be the reason behind this, sudden change? Was it being planned in advance, or was it really sudden?
Vishal, thank you for having me. If I can start, just giving you a little bit of context, if that's okay. The Key government, the John Key government of the 2009 to 2017, over the years of that prime ministership, the numbers of Indian migrant workers in New Zealand expanded enormously. Then there was a problem during COVID. New Zealand shut its borders, and Indian lawmakers and people who had connections with New Zealand were very upset with the way New Zealand treated the Indian migrant workers that we had here. During COVID, the New Zealand government did a reset and tried to prioritise New Zealand workers into the low-skilled migrant jobs. Business was very unhappy. Business has just elected the government it wanted, and this government is now saying, again, we have too much migration, so we have to clamp down on everything. So I feel that this range of things that they're bringing in is simply to have more control over who comes in. The interesting thing, I think, is that business is very unhappy about this. From what the people we talk to, they're very unhappy about it. They like having the choice of having a migrant workforce. One could say it's because, maybe you can pay people a bit less and work them harder, I don't know, in some of those areas. But certainly the business leaders are very unhappy with this recent, change to things. So it's going to be interesting to see how many of them survive these changes.
Okay, so Vandana, what are you expecting out of this? How do you think this change in visa rules to, if you want to apply for a visa to New Zealand, some new rules have been announced, as we mentioned earlier. So how do you expect this will, affect the Indians who want to go to New Zealand, and what are you really expecting?
Okay, yeah, thank you so much. For certain group of migrants, things haven't changed, but there is a lot of concern because they see a lot of announcements coming in, and even those who probably will not be impacted are concerned. So a lot of Indians migrating or thinking of moving here may not be impacted. So those who are thinking of coming to study here, move on a post-study work visa, are really not impacted. This primarily impacts the accredited employer work visa holders, specifically those who are working in low-skilled roles. So in ANSCO 4 or 5 roles is, if I clarify that. So after
Could
COVID,
you clarify that for our viewers? What is that ANSCO rule that you mentioned?
Okay, I would do that. So prior to this accredited employer work visa, this is a recent policy, so not too old. So this came out when the borders reopened post-COVID, somewhere mid-2022. Before this, we had an essential skills work visa where migrants were assessed as high skill, mid skill based on 2 factors, the salary and the ANSCO code. So what ANSCO actually is in Australia and New Zealand, standard classification of occupation. So New Zealand refers to that to assess the job roles where it aligns. So the occupations are ranked based on what are the skills needed for an employee to work in those roles. So, and score 1, 2, 3 are considered skilled occupations, and score 4 and 5 are considered low skills or unskilled occupations. So this primarily impacts those who would be getting a job in ANSCO 4 and 5. The intent is New Zealand really wants to give New Zealanders the first opportunity, as they say. Last year has seen a lot of influx. The numbers have been, record numbers in low-skill migrants moving
Yeah,
to
the government
New Zealand.
mentioned around 170,000 people had migrated to New Zealand in the last 1 year. So
Yes.
is
And
that number unprecedented?
yes, and this is an unsustainable numbers actually. At the same time, last year also saw a lot of New Zealanders coming on job seekers benefit. Like New Zealanders were not getting jobs, whereas migrants were being called for from overseas to do to work in those roles. So the change primarily is targeted so that New Zealand get what it wants. So they get the highly skilled, or they get the migrants in skills which are in demand here. So there
Correct
are
me if I'm wrong. The New Zealand government, the latest New Zealand government, did it not, come to power saying that it was pro-immigration and pro-immigrants? Was it not the case?
Yes.
See, I'll tell you what, that was. But at the same time, New Zealand doesn't want migrants to be exploited. And what we saw last year was the policy, the intent of the last policy may not have been bad, but there were people who could misuse the policy. There were gaps in place there. And what really happened as a result was a lot of migrants were being exploited, which isn't an ideal situation. So the aim or the intent on, like when we say bringing in the English language requirement, whether it will really do what the intent is or not, time will tell. But 4 bands in IELTS or an equivalent is what the new policy will require for somebody who's working in a skill level 4 or 5 occupation, just so that they are able to read their employment agreement, just so that they understand what their responsibilities are, and less likely to be exploited, if I convey in that sense.
Okay. To bring in Ghazali, you've been covering so many immigration stories. So a lot of Punjab youngsters move to the foreign nations each year, thousands. So what is the reaction that you're getting on the ground since you are in Chandigarh, Punjab? What are you hearing? Are there any reactions coming in?
See, as of now, the news has just come out yesterday or day before, and as of now, the complete details are not available with all the applicants, since the news will carry it and it will take at least a week to seep in, and then people will start reacting. But I just wanted to bring in a point and ask the experts here that generally from Punjab, the migration which happens, these youngsters go via the student visa and then try to convert it into PR, or let's say the citizenship part. So I just wanted to ask that if both the experts can enlighten us, that what is the composition of the Indian diaspora there? Because generally for Canada and Australia, in these countries, the Punjabis are the youngsters who go there. They go on a student visa, and then they try to work in the menial jobs. You won't find somebody in a very blue-collar jobs or in a very high academic positions or as such. But their entire motto is to get into an undergrad degree program, stay there for 3 years or 4 years till the duration of the program, and then try to engage into or work somewhere in some small outlet and all. But the primary intention is to acquire a PR. So I just wanted to get an idea that how will this impact the ones who are going on a student visa, though the rules have changed for the work visa?
I don't think I'm the best person to answer that one.
I'll
But
take that one.
you can just share with us the kind of composition of the Indian diaspora there. Like, are most of the people involved in high collar jobs, or are they in business?
Well, I mean, what I can say is that, and this comes back to New Zealand wanting a free trade agreement with India. We look at Australia. Australia has that free trade agreement, but as part of that, they had to allow all students to become permanent residents after their study. And this is a thing that's going to be a bit jarring for New Zealanders, I think. I'm not sure that they would agree with that in general. I mean, politically it might be unpopular, and that's why I wonder whether a free trade agreement is possibly further away than before, because this, I think, will offend lawmakers in India. I just, it's got that feeling of New Zealand first, and I mean, other countries are nationalistic as well in the way they approach things. I think India is also that way. But Vandana probably knows a little bit more about exactly
Also,
what.
Dita, just
Yes.
to ask you one question. So the statement that the government of New Zealand made, that it's introducing these changes to reduce the vulnerability of immigrants. So what do you think about that? Is it a valid argument, or does the government have enough data to prove that point?
Well, I personally feel a bit irritated when immigrants are blamed for everything in New Zealand not being good enough. I mean, we have huge cuts going on in this country across the public service. It's not immigrants' fault that these services do not work properly if they don't work properly. So I think the reality is that New Zealanders are not having children enough to replace ourselves. And if we want a growing and thriving economy, we do need migration. I think a lot of people are struggling to get their heads around that. And like Canada has accepted people low skilled to high skilled, a whole range of people, because they realise there's gaps everywhere. I mean, today the construction, they've changed the path to residency for construction workers, for example. But we don't have a lot of New Zealanders who, all the New Zealanders who could possibly be in construction probably are already. We still need a whole range of people to come into New Zealand and fill jobs, I feel. But Vandana might know better than me whether that's the reality. But that's my perception.
Could this adversely affect the workforce requirement? Could this,
That's
work in the
That's what business is saying. Business is definitely complaining a lot about this. They don't like it. So, and also they don't, but also the other thing is they don't like paying, because the requirement was whoever came in had to be paid median wage. They don't like that either. They'd like to pay people lower. So obviously they've got their own things that they want to, they want cheap labour basically. So I don't think they should be allowed that.
I think Ghazali has a question.
Yeah, I just wanted to get an idea about the Indian diaspora there in New Zealand, because is it the same like what we have in Canada, that people are there in influential position even politically, or they're also running their own businesses, or in New Zealand it's more subdued, that the workforce, or generally the Indians who go there are in the workforce in low menial jobs, or they're also politically very active? I just wanted to get an idea. And then my second question would be that how it will impact the Indian students, because after Canada changed the rules, there were many students who keep planning about their migration from here to Canada or Australia in a year or two in advance. But due to diplomatic strain between Canada and India, the first worry or the first phase was that people started thinking, or the youngsters started thinking, that will their visas will be processed or not. And later, Canada itself changed the rules. So just my two questions on that. One, that what's the composition of the Indian diaspora? And second, that how it will impact the student visa holders or aspirants who want to go through the student visa.
Vandana, I think you can certainly
Okay,
answer.
Okay, I'll take that one. So if we talk about the student visa space, like we said, this policy will not impact them. But I also wanted to give you a brief on few changes that happened in the student visa space a few years back. New Zealand has been trying to attract highly skilled workers, or the skills that New Zealand requires, if I put it that way. So there were changes in student visa space. So anybody who's doing a master's get better work rights, things like that. So what has essentially happened in last few months is we've seen a shift. We've seen a shift from skilled professionals choosing to study here in New Zealand. We've seen a shift from students selecting high quality education providers. So we really don't have student visas being approved for low level courses. The application will just not be approved. And that is the reason we see a shift in the kind of application accommodations we get for student visa now. So that's a positive thing. Apart from that, if you ask me how are the Indians represented, I see them well represented across all sectors. We see highly skilled Indians. If you talk about nurses, nursing is a straight to residence here in New Zealand. And last year, Indian nurses have been the highest cohort of the biggest numbers of the skilled professionals in nursing who have got this residence, who relocated to New Zealand. So I would say Indians are well represented across sectors. So we've got really some highly skilled Indians whose skills are being appreciated here. So that was one part. I also wanted to cover a bit about the exploitation, or whether these changes would really make a difference. So a lot of obligation has been put back on the employers with these recent changes, in the sense that if they hire a migrant, they have to ensure that they consistently give them 30 hours a week of work for the period that they've supported the migrant for. And if the migrant is no longer working for them, till now, the obligation wasn't on the employer to inform immigration. Now it has come back to the employer. If the employee is no longer working, they are the ones who have to inform immigration. Again, they are the ones who have to make sure that the employee has the required skill set that they need. What we saw last few months is the employers would hire, and once the migrant was here, they were not given jobs. Either they were just made to leave the job without proper notice, or without completing the term, and that probably led to a lot of exploitation as well. So I'm sure these changes will have a positive impact, and the times will tell, but definitely more obligation on the employers, just so that they support the employees they have supported in the process.
I think,
Rita, do you have any questions?
I was just going to say on the matter of exploitation. I mean, New Zealand has this English language requirement puts New Zealand in line with Australia and other countries, Canada, etc. But in Australia, this English language provision has not led to less exploitation. It hasn't changed it. I think actually what they need to do is be even stricter about how they monitor and look at these employers who are doing this. So, yeah, I think the jury is out on whether it will actually achieve the aim that they say it is there for. So, yeah, I just wanted to add that in.
Okay, I just wanted to ask about, like in Canada, perhaps you would have addressed it earlier in the session. I just wanted to ask one thing. Like, Canada has been changing its rules, and primarily the reason which was suggested there by the authorities, or what we are picking up from the reports, is that it's getting very expensive as far as the accommodation is concerned. So is the reasons similar in New Zealand as well for changing the visa rules for the migrants? Is it the same reason why the rules have been changed? Is it purely economics there, or no?
I don't think so. That sounds like a very caring thing to change the rules for. I'm not sure New Zealand views it that way. We do have a shortage of housing and things, but that's been and housing is very expensive. So I do feel, if they're getting rid of the median wage threshold barrier to pay people. So people who come here on a minimum wage are going to struggle very, very hard. I mean, it's not much at all compared with the cost of living. 5%
So the
inflation.
main argument that the government is making is that it's reaching an unsustainable level of migration. Is that the main argument that the New Zealand government is making?
That is what they're making, yes. And they're also saying it's a very high-risk environment at the moment. They're seeing a lot of applications from people that they have to check and triple-check. And this is happening all over the world at the moment. So I think exploitation and just having a sustainable, migrant workforce is part of it. But I also do, I think it's a nationalistic thing as well to keep New Zealanders in work and to push more of them into work, because they want to slash the number of beneficiaries as well. So.
Okay, so we'll have to wait and see how this impacts, in the future, how this impacts Indians and other people who come to New Zealand seeking work.
So do you think with your experience that a free trade agreement, this will at all impact conversations about a free trade agreement? Because I just do seriously wonder about that. I've seen this story all over Indian sort of newspapers and CNN and everywhere about the English language requirement. So I'm just wondering, is that likely to upset people there, or?
Oh yes, it will upset people because many region from where the migration happens, English language test is a challenge. From those region from where the bulk of migration happens, so that's mostly the rural areas of India. And because if logically, if you are in the affluent part of India and if you're already affluent, you'll not try to migrate for work. So generally, a large part of those migrants come from those region of the country where English language would be a challenge to go through the test, to undergo the test. People generally spend, I think, lakhs of money for training. They spend millions to take the training, English eligibility test and all. So it's time consuming. You have to prepare for 6 months to a year to appear for the IELTS test. And then you wait for the results. It stays valid for a couple of years, and then you apply for the visa. So it's not only time consuming, it's also involves some money as well. And now for New Zealand, since there was no language test as we're learning now, perhaps people were more comfortable without even appearing for any test. If you have all the qualifications and eligibility, you're getting the visa is easily. But putting that English language thing will certainly upset a lot of aspirants.
Yeah.
Can I just ask
Interesting
you,
point raised. Yeah.
Can I just ask you, is New Zealand considered desirable still? I mean, how does it compare with Australia, with Canada, with England, or America? Or?
Maybe she will be able to explain it further. But my limited viewpoint is that now we are getting every month or almost every month we are reporting such stories that how Indians are abandoning their citizenship and they're moving to other countries. So while you want to acquire citizenship of a new country, there is a percentage of population who loves to or which will love to settle in a place where Indians are already there. But there are enough number of people who would love to go where there is no diaspora, where there is space, where there is no crowd or gathering of that kind that you always get the same feeling while migrating to another country as well. So New Zealand comes in that category, that though the Indian diaspora is there, but as compared to countries like Australia, Canada, or even US, UK, and Germany, you will not find as many Indians as you find in these countries. So that makes New Zealand more safer, except that Christchurch mosque attack and a couple of stray incidents. I don't think there is a kind of any hate crime there. And that makes it very desirable in that sense that it's a very peaceful country, and New Zealand carries a very positive image due to the lady prime minister you had who resigned recently, and then all sort of things that overall it has a very peaceful image that you don't find any kind of hate crime, any kind of difficulties in settling down there. That the diaspora is there, it's lesser in number, and if you have got a work visa, then obviously you have a job there.
And one thing which was really attracting a lot of Indians in last few years was a very streamlined process moving on to residence. So the 6-point system which we recently introduced is a very easy to understand process, and highly, especially the highly skilled professionals I'm talking. We had seen a lot of interest coming in from highly skilled Indians wanting to relocate to New Zealand as well. Indians who were expat over in Middle East for years and years would have started thinking of moving to New Zealand. That was a very positive thing that we saw last few months and years. My only concern here is when the goalpost is shifted quite often, so that one policy changes and the other changes. When there are such shifts quite often, it really demotivates, or this kind of skills that New Zealand really wants. So this policy change may not impact them, but it may deter them from moving to New Zealand because they don't know what if they come here and the goalpost shifts again. So that probably would be a concern, that the skilled professional that New Zealand wants probably will demotivate them to think of New Zealand or moving to New Zealand.
I agree.
And I'll just add one point, that how the seamless process of acquiring a visa makes a country more desirable. The lesser number of time in issuing the visa, the lesser conditions are there. So even if you don't have anything to do with New Zealand, but if you're if you're a migrant aspirant, then any country which offers you a seamless process, you will tend to go there. New Zealand falls in that category as well.
Yeah.
Well, for now, anyhow, maybe not for much longer.
What do you have to say about that, Dita? I mean, do you not feel?
I think what you guys have all said is correct, that it goes from one extreme to the other all the time, and it's really hard. An immigration advisor in New Zealand has got a very tough job, I think. They're constantly having to get their head around new rules, new political, sort of goals, and yeah, it should just be a very standard and straightforward thing, and last. Even when governments go out, it should continue the way it is. I don't know why it just changes, goes from one extreme to the other, it seems to me. And people are confused. I'm sure they are.
I just have one more question, if you can clarify that. Like many European countries have got these politicians who are coming in with anti-immigrant policy and all, and there are huge sentiments within the population as well. Do you think this also sort of getting into New Zealand as well, in New Zealand society, or say in the polity, that politicians will start raising those issues as well? Does it look very likely?
The last government, when they tried to do the immigration reset under Jacinda Ardern and say we want to put Kiwis first, they were accused of racism, but I don't think racism motivated that. And same today. I mean, they came with a big this national government we've got now, coalition government, came saying we're very pro-migration, we want that. Now they've seen the reality and they've had to pull it back. But I'm not sure that racism really... I mean, of course, there's always people in society who are racist, and that is a sad truth. But I think people actually understand that Indian people are so integral to our workforce. If they were not here, it's almost like the country wouldn't function. The retirement system would not function. The hospitals would not, seriously, I do feel it's almost at that level.
And if I also give one perspective, eventually anybody who's coming to work here should have a pathway moving on to residence. That is what the intent of the immigration in New Zealand is. Like a lot of Middle Eastern countries, we do not want people to be here on a work visa long term and just extending one work visa after the other. It's not ideal. So when kids grow here, they are, they kind of schooled here, but the parents don't have a pathway to residence. It's actually not ideal. And that was the reason we saw South Island residence visa granted to a lot of migrants who have been in the country for long term without any pathway to residence. So after that, they started changing rules. And this changes again, it's in their favor, because if somebody has a 4 bands in IELTS, eventually has an option to move on to 6.5, which is a requirement if they ever have to apply for a residence. So we really don't want people to be here long term, establish their life, kids growing here, and then actually not having a pathway to residence at all. Not an ideal situation though.
Some interesting points made in the last 5-7 minutes. So I think we can call it a day. We have sort of covered everything now. Thank every one of you for sparing your time, and we'll see you again soon.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
See you later.